Okay, 30 minutes. Hello, everybody. How we doing? Good, good, good. All right, all right, all right. Okay, thank you very much for the intro. So, today we're going to talk about crossing across platforms. What does that mean? Some people are just like, okay, what does that actually mean? So hopefully in the next 30 minutes, I showcase exactly what I mean by crossing across platforms. Before I begin, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. Thank you to Wasim for this great stuff. So I'm Sani, I'm the founder of HAIBRID. Not as fancy as it sounds, actually. It's kind of just me working there, so don't, it's not too much. I'm also a Google developer expert, which means I'm one of the cool kids that Google decides to give some free tickets. I don't know how I got in, but shh, don't tell them. So I'm a huge fan of the Avatar movie. Has anyone not seen that movie? Anyone? So everyone has seen the movie. Good, good, good. You see? That's good. All right. You can find me online, Sani Yusuf everywhere. Really, really easy. It's the same username everywhere, like pretty much saniyusuf.com and all of that. I always say if you can find anybody that looks this ugly using that username and is not me, then let me know. Good. OK. So let's begin. It's been a great year. 2018 has been a great year. One or two not so great things, but generally it's been a great year. So, this is you. You have a great job in 2018. Really, really awesome job. You're working for Amazon for like $2 an hour or something like that. No pee breaks, You have well-tested code as well, How many people actually test their code? No, not like half test. They actually test the code. Good. OK, good amount of numbers. So you have well-tested code. You're doing your little TDD. You have unit tests running. You have CI, CD, all of that. All the continuous things working. And your football team is finally winning again. That's the most important part. Exactly. After 21 years of agony, they're finally winning again. If you know, you know. And summer in England is absolutely awesome. It's still summer. We're going to have one hell of a winter, I believe. We have to. It doesn't come for free. What could possibly go wrong in your life? What could go wrong? Can anybody think of anything that could go wrong? Don't be bad. OK. Along comes this guy. You know this guy? I call him the client. This is the guy, the client. This guy is the biggest. OK. It's really nice. He's got a lot of money. This is the one guy that can fire everybody in your company, including your boss. Do you know how? By not giving you his money. That's the one way he can fire everybody, even the CEO. The guy comes, and clients love to, I don't know what goes on in their head. They sleep and they wake up and they come up with the most interesting requirements. I want a spaceship. I want this. I want a submarine. I want to use a submarine to go to space. It's crazy. Exactly. So what does the client want? This is what the client wants. He says, I want a mobile app, and I want a desktop application. And this is assuming you already have a web application for him, right? He says, I want these two. Everyone has an iPhone now. Everyone has an Android phone. Some people still use BlackBerry mobile phones. Some people still have Windows phones, So I want one of those. And you can't really say no. Just like Bruce Lee, you can't really just say no. Eventually, you give in. You get knocked out. That's a give it. So your manager, the one guy you think is going to stick up for you, nope. Your manager just says, you got to do what the client wants. He says, you have till the end of the month. Why is it that every single manager, no matter what country, no matter what language, no matter what continent they're from, they always use this one line? You have till the end of the month. I don't understand, And there's always never budget. There is never, ever budget. If your manager has budget for you, marry that manager. That's a great manager. There's never budget, And if you're lucky, your manager might tell you, good luck, Exactly. Now, this is you, Because you call the wife, it's going to be a late one today, Nothing seems to be working, because you're trying to fix this problem, right? Okay. And it's not easy. So let's talk about what you already have. Client has given you a new requirement. Let's see what you already have. So you have a web app built with probably a server technology, most likely. How do I know? Most likely you have some .NET type of, existing website, robust, well-tested. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Microsoft people in the room. I know Microsoft people because I can see them. Exactly, yeah. Microsoft people, or maybe Java. I also know Java people because I used to be one of them. And PHP people, I know them because they age the quickest. Exactly, I know that exactly. So maybe you have one of these server-side, web applications that works really, really well. You spent millions of dollars, years, and everything building this great thing. But now you need to build a mobile app. You need to build a web app, and you've spent millions of dollars in this infrastructure, right? So this will be the rookie, I say, very ignorant first attempt. All right, we need a mobile app. OK, we're just going to go and create a team, a mobile team. Remember, there's no budget. So you're going to go learn Android and iOS and all of that, right? You go learn that. That will be your first attempt, educated attempt. You'd go through that. All right. And you create a separate repo for the desktop application, right? And by the way, if you hear me say desktop, that's just how I say desktop. It's kind of like a Nigerian thing, so sorry. Exactly. So life is good. You fixed the problem, right? No. This is what you didn't consider. No one told you. Code sharing across platforms. How are you going to code share across platforms? You're going to support Android, iOS. So if you already have like a .NET application, how the hell are you going to reuse that? Because Android is what? Kotlin or Java or C++ if you're like really, really mean. For iOS, you have the most beautiful language, Objective-C, or Swift if you're sane. And yeah, so you have that. And they all have different set of tools. And you probably need more hands. The only way you can stay sane and get a working application, that is, you need more people. But remember what the manager said. No budget. You have to do it. OK, so what do we do? All right? This is you again. This time you've completely given up. You want to leave your job, but you need the money, the mortgage, the kids, exactly. We know the story. So let's solve your problem. Let's solve your problem. So this is what you want in theory. In theory, what do you want? You want the ability to use the same technology across all platforms, right? You want to make sure if I have a web app written in a specific technology, I can take that technology and create the mobile app, and I can use the same technology for the desktop application. That's fair, right? That's theory. We want to be able to write these applications in pretty much the same programming language. It would be pretty cool. I wouldn't want to be writing Java one day, the next day I'm writing, COBOL, and the next day I'm writing Fortran. It's not really nice, But this is one of the most important parts. You really want to share the code. You want to be able to share the code base. If I write a component for my web application, it would be really, really cool if I can use that same component in my mobile application, or at least to some degree. That would make sense. I need to be efficient, right? And you also want to be able to use similar sort of like processes and build tools. That also really, really helps you. Because one of the things we developers like to do is, especially the Java people, the app is building, just stay, and for the next 2 hours, the app builds. And it's always going to fail, but that's OK. So let's make a case for Angular. I'm going to tell you why Angular can actually help you with this particular problem, right? So why Angular, first of all? What is Angular? Some people call it a framework. Some people call it a library. Depending on who you ask, and how React they are, they might have favorable things to say, some might not. And depending if they've done AngularJS or not, so depends. But generally, Angular is, if we use the word the framework, it's a framework that allows you to go across platforms. If you look at the actual Angular web page, they use the word platform a lot because it can run on both browser environments and non-browser environments. And one of the reasons why I think Angular is a great case for a scenario like this is, first of all, rich API. Angular has really, really robust API, and that's why it's very popular across enterprise. You have things like reactive forms, right? Which probably is my favorite feature of Angular. HTTP client, you can really do a lot of things with the HTTP client and the client module. You can, do interceptors, you can play around with service workers and all of that. And the router is very, very, very robust as well. It took a while to create it. I mean, it's such a great router. The guy that wrote it left the team and started a new company. Became really successful too. So that's how good a router it is. Localization and internationalization. I believe right now, Olivier Ocombe is actually giving a talk, and he is like the king of localization. So if you support multiple languages and things like that, because we kind of forget that the whole world doesn't really speak English. Because as English speakers, if somebody doesn't speak English, it's almost like they're doing us a disservice. Like, why don't you speak English? Like, we forget, And also the component structure and the component library. That really, really, really makes Angular a great framework. And other features, enterprise friendly. I'm missing an S there. You can do server-side rendering, right? If you SEO is critical to you. You're working for a magazine or something like that, where SEO is like a make or break thing. Server-side rendering, and that's where Angular Universal comes in. Still using the same set of tools, but you can render on the server side. The CLI is great. You can do all of that. Because I always say with tooling, I don't like tooling. Hands up if you actually like messing around with tooling, like Webpack and all of that. Does anybody actually like that? Now we know where the serial killers in the room are. Yeah, exactly. Be careful with Webpack and all those things. I always say, if you venture into the tooling layer, only a few people make it back out. Very few. Very few. Exactly. I've seen people give up their careers after just one day of Webpack, like, nope, this is not for me. I'm just going to go do music. Exactly. And the greatest part of Angular is the super community, right? The community is the greatest part. That's why we're all here. I've been to 5 continents in the world talking about Angular, and that's because everywhere you go, there is a robust community of people that are solving the same problems. And there's a very non-toxic community as well, which is great. Linux, PHP, take note. Exactly. So let's create a hypothetical use case, right? This is what we want. Very similar thing like this. What we want an iOS, Android, Windows mobile sometimes, because enterprise people, desktop web app, things like that. And we want a desktop application as well, right? Pretty fair? Right? OK. So let's try to see what the web solution would look like, right? OK. So this is what your typical web solution would look like. You would have your application. Then you would pick some sort of UI library. Or if you're like me and you're lazy, you'd go to Theme Forest and buy a very nice theme. Pretty good. $50. Does the job. Client does not have to know. Exactly. It's true. If they don't know, it wouldn't hurt them. So you take your app, you build that on top of some framework, UI framework, Bootstrap, material design, you slap Angular on top of that. Of course, you should be using TypeScript. If you're really not using TypeScript, I don't trust you. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, JavaScript sits on top of that, or ES, whatever version. Because now if you say ES6, you can offend somebody. So ES-Next or ESX, as they say. Exactly. And of course, you can still decide for your application to go either the SPA route or the Angular Universal route. Doesn't really matter. You'll still be able to use the same tools to achieve this web solution, right? So for the mobile solution, pretty much the same. I want to be able to write my mobile app, choose some sort of framework. And for that framework, I would use probably something like Ionic or NativeScript. Why? Because they both have solid integrations with Angular. So I still haven't, I've separated what I'm doing and what I'm delivering from the core. And that's the great part. Those of you who know me know which one I'm a fan of. But that's a story for another day. So let's go to the desktop solution. Pretty much the same thing, but there's this little difference there. And you use something called electron, which is something that will sit on top of your application, and that you can support Mac, Windows, or Linux. All three of them, you can support that. But the great thing is you're using one code base. And the greatest part of desktop is the difference between the web and desktop is very little. A desktop application and a web application are targeted to really people that sit on a desk, or on a laptop and use, take advantage of the full screen, which is not too different to a web application. So if you already have an existing web application built with Angular, porting that to the desktop becomes really easy with Electron because nothing really needs to change. Electron will just give you the integration to the APIs that the computer gives you and the shell. But that's it. The look and feel can stay the same. If it's responsive, it's great. All right. So now, the first question or the first thing that would come to your mind is how do you share code with all these, things that are, these ideas? Because right now, you still haven't solved anything, right? Ionic CLI to the rescue. And you can actually, since CLI version 6, I think, you can actually do something called ng-generate application, which means you can actually add a sub-application within your main application. So not only normally when you do ng-generate with an application, you create a new Angular application, but now you can actually have mini apps that all are built within the same configuration. So basically, it favors that monorepo type of strategy, right? And there's also another one, which is ng-generate library. You can basically add a library, a shared library. So if you can add applications and libraries, a good part of your problem is actually being solved. And I would explain why in the next few slides. So first of all, how does it all fit together? So you have your web application. You do your ng-generate. Your web application would most likely be the main app that you do your ng-new with, that you'd start off with. Then the mobile would be like a sub-application. The desktop app would be like a sub-application in the same monorepo. Then what you do is you create a shared library. And you take that shared library, then you share all the code inside the desktop and the mobile and the web. So if you have, for example, an authentication module or something like that, right? You can just create that in your shared library, and all of them will use the very same authentication module. To some degree, you can share routing depending, but really now you have a safe space where all the common things can live there, and you can just pick and choose them, right? So basically, this is where monorepo approach really, really shines, because you can reach out at any point in time. And it's so much more easy for your build tools, continuous integration, continuous deployment to really work, because everything is in kind of one place. The bad part is if you're starting a brand new job, you spend 1 hour downloading a maybe 2 GB repo. But you only need to do that once. That's a fair trade-off. Like I said, that shared code will be imported as an ng module. Pretty similar to how you use something like material design. You just import a bunch of ng modules, whatever you need, right? So then, Mr. Client comes again. And he has a weird scenario. What is the scenario? So you have 3 apps, mobile, web, and desktop, right? You have components and modules inside that shared module. Everybody understand that so far, correct? OK. But the components have some shared logic, which is expected. That's why we have a shared library. But the most important thing is now, they have some platform-specific logic. So there's something, this component needs to behave like this on the web, but only on the web. This component needs to behave like this on mobile, but only on mobile. This component needs to behave like this on desktop, but only on desktop. Now, you might be tempted to say, oh, I'm just going to create 3 components. Then think about when you have a library of 500 components. Are you going to create 3 flavors of 500 components? That's around 1,500 components. Nobody wants to get paid to maintain that. Trust me. Creating components is easy. Maintaining them, that's the hard part. So what do? So this is the scenario here visualized. We are all guilty of this, aren't we? We are all guilty. It's OK. It's OK. Your secrets are safe with me. We're all guilty of this. We have some ng-if in the template. We use the smart component pattern. Oh, if it's desktop, show this. If it's mobile, show this. If it's web, show this. Pretty good. It's easy to get away with, right? We all do this. I have code bases that are still writing this. The problem is, we can end up what I call a God component, the component that wants to do everything. And there's actually a code smell for this. The code smell, I kid you not, is called inappropriate intimacy. That's a legit code smell. It's a legit thing. I did not make this up. You can Google it. It's called inappropriate intimacy, when things that are not supposed to be, having access to each other are just there. Because what happens now is, in your application for mobile, you're using the behavior specific to mobile, but there's still code that's just lying there, dead code. And guess what? Most likely, even tree shaking might not even remove that, because it doesn't really know, is this going to be used or not? So things like that. You have that particular mobile component flavor, but you have the web code inside there. So how do you actually solve this problem? OK, let's see how we solve this. The first way is we can use component inheritance. And I actually like this method, and it's easily the most underused method in Angular. For some reason, we as Angular developers, we seem to forget that component inheritance is a thing. And I think maybe it's a case because a lot of people that write in Angular have come from traditional JavaScript background, where we're used to prototypical inheritance. So now object-oriented inheritance is we don't want to do that. I don't know why, because I like object-oriented inheritance. So you'd have something like this. You'd have, let's say, in that your shared library, you'd have some component, right? You create that component. But for that component, you'd absolutely give no implementation to your template. Zero implementation. This component, I call it an abstract component. Think of it as the same way you think about an abstract class. What is an abstract class? It's a class that cannot have any implementation, but can only be inherited, right? It exists just to give implementations. And that's what you would do with this. So you put your shared function, where what mobile, web, and desktop want inside of there. But then when you go, for example, to your mobile code, you'd create another component that basically just shadows that. I call them shadow components. All it does, it inherits from that component in your shared library. That's all it does. So now, if you want a mobile-specific things, or your client comes and says, I want to be able to do this, you don't need to go to that shared component and break everything. You just go into this component that extends, and you put all your implementations there. And that allows you not to really break stuff. OK? So, problem solved, right? Not really. What about white labeling? What happens when you want to white label? Does anybody work in a company that does white labeling here? Your thoughts and prayers are with me. Don't worry, my brothers. We shall prevail. So what exactly is white labeling? This is the scenario of white labeling. Basically, you would have an app skeleton, right? Sort of like a shell that you build. And when you build that shell, the app itself, the skeleton itself, is also an abstract. It's not an app that you sell. But when the client comes and says, I want to buy from you, you then, sort of create an app based on that shell. It's basically, I always say, white labeling is not too different to politicians. On the outside, they look all different. But internally, if you really dig deep in, they're all the same. So very similar. And some customers can really want specific things. There's that customer that wants that one thing. And for example, how many people know that for a Boolean state in a checkbox, apparently there's actually 3 states, not 2. There's check, unchecked, and there's also the interdeterminate state. Because there was one guy in the world that had a company that needed that requirement. There was one guy. And they're like, oh, we might as well make that for him. So it's things like that. So this is what a white labeling application would look like. You have client A, client B, and client C, all using and sharing, right? So what's the solution for this type of scenario? The first thing is you create configurable modules. Very, very, very important that you create configurable modules, because that's how we use Firebase and all these types of things. It basically allows you to create a module that can be configured. please, oh please, use injection tokens. They're not pretty, but please use them. This ensures that now, when you take that shared module into a white label application, the application you create, the white labeled application, can police its own implementation. You know, think about that. If Firebase, like when you use Firebase, you provide the API key and all of that, and that's how it knows, OK, this is you. Because if you're creating a white label application, this particular client would have a different database, would have a different authentication flow, and that kind of thing. So you can sort of create an injection token that will allow you to do that. And I actually have something that looks like. So this is what your implementation would look like. You'd have a module. I have a module here called configurable module. You would provide some sort of like configuration, and you create an injection token. And you always, please, in the providers, it's very good that you use the use value so that to avoid conflicts. So you'd provide the token, and you'd like use the injection token method. And then you can, in all the services, or where that particular components where you need to use that injection token, you can just use dependency injection to resolve it. This is what that module would look like now when you want to use it in an application. You just go and provide your configuration, all the API keys and everything. That means now you have this linear way of maintaining your modules on the long run. And that's very important because maintenance is where we really, really want to focus on. But you know what? I can sit here and tell you about, you know, how you should share code and structure your architecture. But in the end, your requirements should be the one that speak the loudest. Let your requirements speak. You know, don't go back to your workplace and say, I heard Sani talk about this, and that's what we have to do. Nope. When you're looking for a job, I'm not going to be there. Exactly. Look at your requirements. OK, what are we trying to solve? What are we, you know, trying to do? And then come up with scenarios. I'll give you a scenario, for example, that I recently had to, which is a very non-orthodox scenario, where we have a white-labeled solution, a healthcare application, and we have different types of people that want to use the same content in our healthcare application. And what did we do? We actually ended up creating, for each content that we have, we created a lazily loaded module for that content. Now, it seems like coupling, but we like to call it cohesion just to get away with it. But it's what works for our own specific use case. There is no right or wrong. Now, some of the things I've shown here today would cover a lot of your use cases. But in the end, always make your requirements speak first. That's very, very important, right? So that has been everything that I would want to show you for my presentation. And if you have any specific requirement, if you have any questions, you can catch me on the break. I can go into requirements. And we have like 1 minute, so we can actually take questions. But yeah, we have time for questions? I have a minute now. OK. All right. So I've been told we don't have time for questions. So thank you very much for having me.